Welcome to Fractured Chaos.
They say you never really know someone until you share a toothbrush holder. Or in my case, until you're staring at them through bulletproof glass while they tell you they're sleeping with your brother. My name is Johnny Mercer. 3 years ago, I had everything. A successful contracting business, a craftsman bungalow in the Sierra foothills with a view that made realtors weep, and Janet, my wife of 8 years. Everyone called us the perfect couple. Everyone was wrong. It started with a text message, not even meant for me. Janet's phone buzzed one night while she was in the shower. I never checked her phone. Trust was our thing. Or so I thought. But this time, something made me glance over. The preview caught my eye. Miss you already. Last night was... The sender? M. Just the letter, nothing else. Maybe it was innocent, maybe it wasn't. I slid her phone back where I found it and said nothing at breakfast the next morning. Janet seemed normal, laughing about a client story, reminding me about dinner with the Hendersons on Friday. Kiss goodbye, same as always. But something had shifted in me, a small crack in the foundation. I didn't confront her. Instead, I started paying attention. The late book club meetings that left no wine on her breath, the new lingerie that appeared in her drawer but never on her body, at least not for me. The way she'd take calls in the bathroom with the shower running, classic signs I was too blind to see. I remember the exact moment I knew for certain. We were having dinner at Marcello's, our anniversary spot downtown. Janet excused herself to the restroom, and her phone lit up on the table. Another text from M. This time, I did something I'd never done before. I picked it up and unlocked it. Her password was still my birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me. The message read, "Can't stop thinking about you. When can you get away again?" I scrolled up. Hundreds of messages, photos I wish I could unsee, plans made while I was working late, declarations of love. What I didn't know then was that M wasn't some random affair. M stood for Martin, my younger brother. The same brother who cried at our wedding, who stood beside me as my best man. The same brother who lived in our guest house for 6 months when he was getting back on his feet after his divorce. The same brother who taught my nephew to throw a baseball and called me every Sunday just to talk. I sat there in that restaurant surrounded by happy couples celebrating special occasions, holding this bomb in my hands. Janet returned, saw my face, and knew. She didn't ask what I'd seen. She just said, very quietly, "I'm sorry." Sorry, as if that covered it. "How long?" I asked, my voice strangely calm. "Johnny!" "How long?" She looked down at her half-eaten tiramisu. 14 months. 14 months. While I was building us a deck for summer barbecues, while I was shopping for her birthday bracelet, while I was planning our future. "It just happened," she said, the oldest excuse in the book. "Things don't just happen, Janet. People make choices." I paid the bill. We drove home in silence. I packed a bag while she cried in the living room, telling me how confused she was, how it wasn't what I thought, how she loved us both. Classic Janet, always the victim of her own decisions. I checked into the Marriott downtown, called in sick to work the next day, drank minibar scotch until I couldn't feel my face, and then I called the one person I thought I could trust, my father. Dad was retired military, not known for his emotional intelligence. But he was fair, always had been. When Martin and I fought as kids, he made us sit at the kitchen table and talk it out, no matter how long it took. Sometimes we sat there for hours. "Both of you," he said after I told him everything. Just those 2 words followed by a long silence. Then, "I failed somewhere. This isn't about you, Dad. Family is always about everyone." Another military maxim. "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? Divorce was obvious. Forgiveness seemed impossible. But there was something else gnawing at me, something darker. See, my contracting business wasn't entirely legitimate. For 3 years, I'd been cutting corners on materials, bribing inspectors, and pocketing the difference. Made a fortune doing it too. Built a reputation as the guy who could bring projects in under budget and ahead of schedule. Magic, they called it. Fraud would have been more accurate. But the Hammond project was different. 40-unit apartment complex on the edge of downtown. I went cheaper than ever before. Structural beams that wouldn't hold a dollhouse, let alone a 4-story building. Electrical work that violated every code in the book. Plumbing that was one flush away from disaster. I knew it was a matter of time before someone discovered it. So when Martin called me a week after I moved out, asking to meet, I thought he wanted to talk about Janet. Apologize, maybe. Beg forgiveness. Instead, he asked to borrow 30 grand from my business account for a foolproof investment opportunity. I said yes. Not because I trusted his business acumen, which was non-existent, but because I suddenly saw an opportunity. A way out. A scapegoat. I transferred the money from my business account through his personal account, making it look like he was stealing from me. Creating a paper trail. The perfect fall guy. My own brother. What I didn't realize? While I was setting him up, he was telling Janet everything about our meeting, including his suspicions about my business practices. Janet wasn't stupid. She'd been doing our personal taxes for years. She knew how much the business should be making versus what was showing up in our accounts. She'd asked questions before, which I'd deflected. But now, with Martin filling her head with theories, she started digging. 2 weeks after that money transfer, the Hammond project collapsed during final inspections. Nobody was hurt, thank God, but the investigation was swift. They followed the money trail, just like I planned, straight to Martin. But Martin had an alibi for the days when the critical decisions were made. An alibi named Janet, who testified that he was with her, at our lake house, the entire weekend. "Can you verify Mr. Mercer's whereabouts during this time?" the detective asked me in the interview room, showing me date-stamped photos of Martin and Janet together. The look on his face when he realized what that meant? I'll never forget it. Neither will the jury. The trial was quick. My lawyer, Bennett Walsh, $3,000 a day and worth every penny, tried to paint me as the victim of both personal and professional betrayal. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails outlining substandard materials, phone calls to inspectors, and the collapse itself, which engineers testified was inevitable given the shortcuts taken. Walsh built his defense around one central argument: temporary insanity due to emotional trauma. My client discovered his wife's infidelity with his own brother, he told the jury. His judgment was compromised. His actions, while regrettable, were the result of a man pushed beyond his limits. It almost worked. But then the prosecution brought out their star witness, my former site manager, Eric Donovan. Eric and I had worked together for 6 years. He was the best foreman in the county, detail-oriented, respected by the crews, honest to a fault. That last quality should have been my warning. "Mr. Donovan," the prosecutor asked, "when did you first become aware of the defendant's fraudulent practices?" Eric looked right at me. No anger, just disappointment. 3 years ago, the Westbrook project. "And did you confront him about it?" "I did. He said it was a one-time thing, cash flow problems. He promised it wouldn't happen again." But it did happen again? Every project after that got worse each time. "And the Hammond project?" Eric shook his head. "I quit 2 weeks in, told him someone was going to get hurt. The jury took 4 hours to convict me. The judge gave me 8 years. Would have been more, but Walsh earned his fee, emphasizing my clean prior record and demonstrated remorse. I remember very little about my first night in prison. Noise, smell, fear that made my teeth chatter. A guard who looked at my paperwork and said, "Contractor, huh? My sister lost her deposit to one of you guys once. Karma's a bitch." Martin visited me once in jail, just to tell me he'd always loved her, that they'd been having an affair for 2 years, that the baby she was carrying, the one I thought was mine, was actually his. "I came to thank you, Johnny," he said through the visitor's phone, his breath fogging the glass between us. "If you hadn't tried to frame me, I might never have had the courage to take what I really wanted." Then he stopped visiting. They both did. Dad came every month like clockwork. Didn't say much, just sat there solid as always. He died in my second year inside, heart attack while shoveling snow. I wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. Instead, I sat in my cell and wrote him a letter I could never send, apologizing for the shame I'd brought to his name. Prison changes you. For some, it breaks them down. For me, it focused me. I had nothing but time to think, to plan, to wait. I learned patience in there, and I learned some interesting skills from my cellmate, Devin, former tech security specialist with a fondness for breaking encryption. Always have a backup plan, Devin told me one night after lights out, and make sure that backup plan has its own backup plan. Devin taught me about digital footprints, about VPNs and proxy servers, about how to move money without moving money. All theoretical, of course, just passing time. I served 3 years before getting out on good behavior, 3 years of imagining what I'd do when I got out, 3 years of their betrayal burning a hole in my chest. Most guys in my situation would go straight for revenge, show up at their door, cause a scene, maybe something worse, but that's not me, not anymore. Instead, I rented an apartment across town, got a job at a hardware store, started going to therapy, even joined a recreational softball league. I was a model ex-con, so model that my parole officer Ramirez started using me as an example to others. "Look at Johnny," he'd say. "That's how you reintegrate." What Ramirez didn't know, what nobody knew, was that every night after my shift, I'd sit in my car outside their house, my old house, and watch them live my life. Martin driving my car, Janet gardening in my yard. Their child, who should have been mine, learning to ride a bike in my driveway. And while I watched, I learned their routines. The code to my old garage door they never changed. The fact that Martin still used the same password for everything. Our childhood dog's name plus his birth year. Sloppy. Devin taught me well. It took just one afternoon while they were at a soccer game to clone Martin's phone. After that, I saw everything. Their texts, their photos, their banking details. That's how I discovered Martin had leveraged my old business contacts to start his own contracting company, using my reputation, my relationships, even my blueprints. And he was making the exact same mistakes I had made. Cutting the same corners, bribing the same inspectors. Some people never learn from others' mistakes. The real surprise came when I found the messages between Janet and someone saved as J. Just the letter, nothing else. History repeating itself. Except this time, J wasn't me. It was Jasmine, Martin's personal assistant, 26 years old, former model, and very, very detailed in her texts about what happened on their business trips. That's when I knew exactly what I needed to do. But first I needed to understand more. About them. About myself. About what I really wanted. There's a park across from their house, my house, with a bench that gives a perfect view of their front door. I sat there one Saturday morning, watching Martin teach what should have been my son how to catch a baseball. A woman sat down beside me. Mid-60s, short gray hair, kind eyes. "Beautiful day," she said. I nodded, not wanting conversation. "My grandson lives in that blue house," she continued, pointing to a place 3 doors down from Martin and Janet. "I'm waiting for him to finish his piano lesson. Do you live around here?" I almost lied, but something about her reminded me of my mother. "I used to," I said. "In that one." I gestured to my old house. "Oh, you must know the Mercers then." The name hit me like a slap. Martin had taken my name too. "They seem like such a nice family," she went on, oblivious. "The little boy, Owen, I think, plays with my grandson sometimes." Owen. They'd named him Owen, after our grandfather. "Are you all right?" the woman asked. "You've gone quite pale." "Fine," I managed, "just remembering." She patted my hand. Memories can be tricky things. Some we hold too tight, some we let go too easily. I looked at her then. Really looked. "Which kind should I be holding on to?" She smiled. "Only you can answer that, dear." I never saw that woman again. Never knew her name. But her question stayed with me. What memories was I holding too tight? That night, I went back to my apartment and opened the file I'd been building. Martin and Janet's texts, financial records, the evidence of Martin's business dealings, enough to destroy them both. And I asked myself, is this who I want to be? The man who destroys lives? Wasn't that exactly who I'd been before? The man who cut corners, who put profit above safety? I closed the file, poured myself a whiskey, called my therapist and scheduled an emergency session. Dr. Landon listened as I told her everything, not about my surveillance, but about my feelings, the rage, the betrayal, the longing for what I'd lost. "What do you think would actually heal you, Johnny?" she asked when I'd finished. "Not satisfy you momentarily, Not scratch the itch, but actually heal the wound. I didn't have an answer. Think about it, she said. Really think. And when you know, we'll work backwards from there. That night, I dreamed about my father. We were sitting at that kitchen table just like when Martin and I were kids and had been fighting. Talk it out, Dream Dad said, no matter how long it takes. I woke up knowing exactly what I needed to do. I sent Janet an anonymous tip about Martin and Jasmine. Not from me, she would have ignored that. No, I made it seem like it came from one of Jasmine's friends who was concerned. Then I waited. 3 days later, Martin came home to find his clothes on the front lawn and the locks changed. Classic Janet. She always was dramatic. He moved into a hotel, started drinking too much, called in sick to work sites. That's when I made my second move. I sent an anonymous complaint to the building department about Martin's current project, a 5-story office building downtown. Included documentation I'd acquired from his files showing the substandard materials. The inspection was a surprise. Martin was caught completely unprepared. The project was shut down immediately. His company's reputation ruined overnight. And then came my masterstroke. With Martin spiraling and distracted, I used his credentials to transfer every cent from their joint accounts, the ones that used to be our joint accounts, to an offshore LLC I'd set up months before. $1.8 million. My money, technically, from my business, the business he stole. When Martin discovered the missing money, he naturally assumed it was Janet. And Janet, finding their accounts empty, assumed it was Martin preparing to leave her for Jasmine. The fight they had was epic, so loud that 3 neighbors called the police. Domestic disturbance, they called it. The officers who responded found more than just a fighting couple. They found Martin's laptop open to his company files. Files showing the same pattern of fraud that had sent me to prison. The same inspectors on the payroll. The same corners cut. It was almost poetic. Martin got 12 years. Longer than mine because he didn't have my fancy lawyer. When they led him away in handcuffs, he looked straight at me where I stood in the crowd of neighbors gathered to watch the spectacle. The recognition in his eyes, the moment he realized what I'd done, was worth every second I spent in that cell. But something unexpected happened in that moment too. As I watched my brother, my flesh and blood, being led away to the same hell I'd just escaped, I felt empty. The satisfaction I'd anticipated for 3 years didn't come. Instead, there was just a hollow space where my rage had lived. Janet came to see me a week later, not to reconcile, not to apologize, but to ask if I knew anything about the missing money. "You took it, didn't you?" she said across my kitchen table. "Somehow you took it all." I just smiled. "Prove it." She couldn't, of course. The money was long gone, donated anonymously to a foundation that builds housing for ex-convicts. Every cent of it. I didn't keep a dime. Because it was never about the money. It was about justice. Or so I told myself. "What happens now?" Janet asked, looking older than her 36 years. "Now? Now you get to experience what I did. Visiting days, commissary accounts, collect calls that cost $5 a minute." She nodded, accepting this. Then, "Owen asks about you sometimes." The statement knocked the wind out of me. "What?" "He found an old photo, asked who the man with Daddy was. I told him it was his Uncle Johnny." "What else did you tell him?" "That you went away for a while. That's all he needs to know right now." I wanted to hate her in that moment, wanted to feel the familiar burn of betrayal. But watching her sitting there, defeated, alone, as lost as I had been, I felt something else entirely. Understanding. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the beginning of something that might someday become forgiveness. "He has your eyes," she said quietly. "Everyone says so." I didn't respond to that, couldn't. "I never set out to hurt you, Johnny. Nobody ever sets out to cause a car crash either. They just drive recklessly and hope for the best." She nodded again, accepted that too. "I should go," she said. "Owen's with my mother. I didn't want to..." She trailed off. "Bring him here," I finished for her. Smart decision. At the door, she paused. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. For all of it." I believed her, that was the worst part. Janet sold the house last month, moved in with her mother in Phoenix. I heard she's filing for divorce. Again. This time from a prison visiting room. As for me, I'm still at the hardware store, Still going to therapy, still playing softball on Thursdays. But now I sleep better. I've been thinking about that woman in the park. About which memories to hold and which to release. About what actually heals wounds rather than just covering them up. I've been thinking about Owen too. About whether he really has my eyes. About whether he might someday want to know his uncle, his real uncle, not the story Janet will tell him or the one Martin might. Last week I did something I never thought I would do. I drove to the prison, signed in as a visitor, sat across from my brother for the first time in 3 years. We didn't say much at first, just studied each other's faces looking for the boys we used to be. "Why are you here?" he finally asked. "Dad," I said. He would have wanted us to talk it out no matter how long it takes. Martin's eyes widened at that, then filled with tears. "I didn't come to forgive you," I clarified. "I don't know if I ever can, but I came to listen, to understand. Because we're the only ones left who remember how Mom made pancakes on Sundays, how Dad taught us to change oil in the Buick, how Grandpa Owen used to slip us $20 bills when our parents weren't looking." Martin nodded, wiping his eyes. "I miss them," he said simply. "Me too." What followed was the hardest conversation of my life. Harder than the trial, harder than prison. We talked about Janet, about the affair, about the business, about the money. "You set me up," he said at one point. "Not an accusation, just a fact." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you took everything from me." He nodded. "I did. Not just Janet, your life, your home. I wanted to be you, Johnny. Always have." The admission stunned me. Martin, charismatic, easygoing Martin, had always seemed so comfortable in his own skin. So unlike me, with my plans and worries and need for control. "I was drowning after my divorce," he continued. "Then I moved into your guest house and saw what you had. The perfect life, the perfect wife, the perfect business." None of it was perfect. I know that now. We sat in silence for a while after that. Not uncomfortable, just necessary. As visiting hours ended, he asked, "Will you come back?" I didn't know the answer, so I told him the truth. "I don't know, but I might." Yesterday I received a letter from Martin. Just 5 words. "You were always the smarter brother." I wrote back with 4. "I forgive you, Em." And for the first time in years, I meant it. Not because he deserved it. Not because what he did was forgivable. But because holding on to that rage was destroying me from the inside out. And I'd already lost 3 years of my life. I wasn't about to lose anymore. You know what the strangest part is? After all that, the betrayal, the prison time, the revenge, I still sometimes miss them both. Family ties don't break easily, even when they should. Dr. Landon says that's normal, that you can miss someone and still recognize they were toxic for you. That forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, that healing happens in its own time. I've started volunteering at a re-entry program for ex-cons, teaching basic construction skills, helping guys put together resumes, showing them there's life after lockup. Last week I got a call from an unknown number. It was Janet. "Owen has a school play," she said without preamble. "He's playing Abraham Lincoln. He asked if his Uncle Johnny could come." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd ask you. 5 years ago, I had everything. A successful business, a beautiful home, a wife I thought loved me. Everything except the truth. Now I have almost nothing. A rented apartment, a minimum wage job, a therapist who charges on a sliding scale. And yet somehow I'm closer to happiness than I've ever been. Because now I have the truth. About Martin, about Janet, about myself. And the truth, painful as it is always better than the most beautiful lie. Tell Owen," I said into the phone, "that his Uncle Johnny wouldn't miss it for the world. Sometimes the long road back to yourself starts with a single step towards someone else. Even if that someone is a 5-year-old boy playing Abraham Lincoln in a construction paper hat and a fake beard. Even if that someone shares my eyes but not my name. Even if that someone is the most complicated part of the most complicated chapter of my life. Because in the end, it's not about who deserves what or who owes whom. It's about who we choose to be when everything is broken. And I choose to be someone my father would have been proud of. Someone who sits at the table until things are talked out. No matter how long it takes.